Greetings from a fishing village on the Atlantic coast. You've tuned in to podcast Portwenn, celebrating the world of Doc Martin unofficially. I'm Chesla Wexler, and we'll be discussing Doc Martin, the medicine, the mayhem, and the marvelous people of Portwenn. Welcome to the first episode of podcast Portwenn Season 2. Before we start, I dropped a short video describing Buckham Fair. I hope you'll check it out. It's on YouTube. Donations to Buckham Fair are a great way to say thanks for this wonderful Doc Martin best medicine entertainment we all love. And now, on to the episode. Our first episode is the start of a new Doc Martin newbie series, but with a neat twist. This time, my guest is a best medicine know-it-all. If you've been watching the Best Medicine playlist, you'll be familiar with Patty, an unspoiled best medicine viewer who has regularly appeared. Patty's watched Season 1 of Doc Martin and is here to talk to me about it. This will have plenty of best medicine spoilers, so if you don't want to hear those, this may not be the podcast for you. So without further ado, come through and welcome back to Podcast Portwenn, Patty.
Hello, everybody.
I'm very glad that you're here. I hope you've had a good spring and summer so far. I guess we're not really officially in summer yet, but
It's felt like it many days and maybe again tomorrow.
yes. I would start with, what was your overall feeling about watching Doc Martin?
I would say I found it intriguing. There's all different kinds of characters. I'm kind of used to having worked in a high-tech world of quirky, possibly not having the best social skills people. So Doc Martin seemed kind of familiar to me. And I've never been to the United Kingdom, so I don't know if it represents a true small town in Great Britain, but I enjoyed, meeting the characters, and they seemed very genuine to me.
When did you first hear about the show?
Gosh, this is going to make me sound really stupid, but it's only recently that I've been watching British shows, but I used to sometimes read about them, and then there was Doctor Who and Doc Martin, and they're radically different shows if you know something about it. They both have Doc in the title, but they are very different. So I probably heard of Doctor Who first. I would say I heard of it many years ago, but I used to think I didn't like British shows. And so when it first came out, I never tried to learn more about it.
Okay, that makes sense. A little fun fact, Martin Clunes has actually been in both Doctor Who and Doc Martin. Had you been familiar, other than having watched Best Medicine and seeing Robert Best, had you been familiar with, Martin Clunes, Caroline Catz, Stewart Wright, Stephanie Cole, any of these actors or actresses prior?
Once I started watching some shows on PBS, you often see clips of others, and I kind of got to know what Martin Clunes looked like before I actually started watching Doc Martin. But I don't think I knew any of the other actors at all.
Okay, so this is pretty new to you. Right. So I've got a whole bunch of questions for you. So what characters did we meet in Season 1?
What characters did we meet? Oh, this is going to be tough. I don't always remember their names, but okay, there's Doc Martin, of course, Elaine, the really bad secretary receptionist, Aunt Joan, I think her name is, and I was really drawn to her, and for some reason, something I really liked about her. I don't know, I just thought she was genuine. I kind of like the way she really loves Martin, but she calls him on his rudeness. Like, she doesn't act like it's okay for you to be rude because you're different. She would tell him, you can't do that. Come on. And I kind of like the way she did that because it was still with love. In one of the episodes, she was featured pretty prominently, and it was kind of interesting to learn her backstory. And I don't know, that's really about it, because there are only 6 episodes, so it's not like we've gone into super depth on any of the characters except Doc Martin, because he's in all of them.
Right.
So, and then Louisa, the little boy Peter.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name of the character, the music guy that had the larynx.
Roger Fenn. Yep, Roger Fenn.
Yeah. He was intriguing. I kind of liked... I liked learning about him and kind of, to borrow from Shrek, peeling away the layers of the onion. and he, deep down, he was a nice guy. And it was interesting that Doc Martin kind of opened up a little bit to him about his secret. And it seemed like that was trust well placed. So I didn't completely understand why he lost his job. But anyway, it seemed like the music thing was one of those, like, the universe is watching out for you. It's a better place for him anyway, kind of thing. But,
right. Yeah.
So that was kind of nice. But I was intrigued by him. I kind of liked him.
Yeah. You've got Bert and Al.
Pardon, Bert.
Bert and Al. Bert Large and Al Large. You remember like the plumber and his son.
The plumber and his son. Okay. Yeah, didn't remember the names. Yeah. Okay. So they were interesting. I liked the way the father eventually came around to what the son wants to do. I really did not like in episode 6. I don't buy, oh, let them tease you because that's how they say they like you, or that's how you'll eventually fit in. I thought that what they did was infantile. And it crossed the line. That is not good-natured teasing. I thought that was really mean teasing. And I was actually surprised at that point that the plumber did what he did. And I was at least happy that there seemed to be a bit of remorse on his face when, I think it was when Martin, I don't think he addressed them directly. He did it through the radio show, when he called into the radio show. And
when they fake the blood?
And when they heard that, yes. and the guy was like, maybe I shouldn't have done that, that's what I got out of his face. And that was somewhat redeeming, but I was hoping they would come back to that a little bit more and there would be a little bit more remorse on, at least some of the people's parts.
Yeah, I was thinking that you were talking about Peter Cronk and I was trying to figure out, like, how did Bert interact with Peter Cronk? I got really confused, but you were talking about how they were teasing Martin.
They were teasing Martin about the blood. When they found out about the blood thing, and then they did that thing where he put ketchup on it. I mean, when the phone call came, I didn't know that it was fake. But as soon as he walked in there and the guy was sitting on the ground, I looked down and said, that's not blood, that's ketchup. And I was hoping that it would come out in that initial scene that, hey, that was really crossing the line and shouldn't have done that. But it didn't. And then later when there was some discussion, when Peter was in the hospital, there was some discussion about Peter and getting teased, and Louisa, the teacher, had told him that. I guess Peter had told Martin that, and and she was kind of like, well, he learned that from me, and that's kind of why he's in the hospital now.
Right, yes.
So there was at least some recognition that maybe that's not the best advice. And I do think good-natured teasing does mean a group likes you, and it can if you can go along with it, you can fit in. But I don't think anybody has to take teasing like that. I just thought that across the line.
And there may be cultural things there too.
Well, I was wondering, it's also that was shot in 2004. And I feel like
England.
I might not have been as adamant about this in 2004, but with our world in the United States today, I feel like vulgarity has been normalized and I hate it. And I think it's so wrong. And I may try and fight a little harder against it than I would have in 2004 when that came out. And, maybe the writers wouldn't write that today. I don't know.
Yeah. And also I'm thinking culturally in England.
Might be different. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, people comment, please, if I get this wrong, but I mean, being teased is almost a sign of love.
To me, it depends on how they're teased. I think sometimes I think people act like it was just a joke. And if it's something you don't like about yourself or something you can't change or you're trying to change and you're not succeeding, I don't think teasing someone about that is fair game. Yeah. I just think that's being mean.
Just to throw in my own opinion on that, it seemed like, they have a doctor who basically didn't tell them he had a blood phobia.
Okay. Go ahead.
Right? Go ahead. So, and then, this other doctor spills the beans on him, on why he couldn't do surgery anymore. And which was mean. I mean, I think Adrian Pitts was very mean to drop that on Martin by gossiping about him in the pub. But I guess I give them a little bit of slack because they've got a doctor who nobody knows he's got this problem with blood.
Okay, if they questioned his credentials and were a little wary about it, and can this guy really do the job, that would be legit. If they did that, but to tease him and try and trick him about it, that's not the way to go, I think. But I think it would have been legitimate to question his qualifications because of it.
Yeah. Do you think anything about the fact that he'd been pretty much a complete jerk to all of them by that point played into it some?
I thought that there had been a little bit of progress between, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the plumber's name. The plumber is Bert and Martin. I thought that there was a little bit of understanding on improvement there, but I'd have to go back and rewatch the earlier episodes.
Right.
To see. And I guess maybe the townspeople have never encountered somebody, I don't know if he's supposed to be on the spectrum or what, but it's, I'm not sure what.
Yeah. He's very posh, right? So he comes into this fishing village in his Lexus, and he's this tall dude in a suit, condescending, arrogant.
Yeah.
All right. So he's got that going for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's my background where I know and understand people more like Martin, and they don't know him well enough yet to know that this guy he struggles with social skills, and he's not trying to be mean. And yes, that is a mean thing to say, but be patient with him and try and help him learn how to rephrase that or whatever.
Right.
Because I feel like he says mean things, but it's like logical to him, not as much malice, And so there's a little bit of a difference, but they don't know him well enough to feel that way, I guess. Or maybe that's just my perspective.
And he's very different from them.
Very,
right?
Very.
Yeah.
And I mean, whether or not he was, I could see how they would think he'd look down on them because you in your suit and yeah. And how he does.
The London guy comes down to this fishing village that's also, fishing agricultural place, and drives his big fancy car. Everybody else has sort of like a beat up pickup truck, and or they're driving their farm tractors or whatever. Since you brought it up, do you feel as if the show feels current or dated or timeless? Like, how did it feel?
I don't know. I don't think it's super dated. I think the phones were a little different maybe, but, I did notice the set, like the house. I think it's probably true England, but you wouldn't see in very many places in the U.S. the doors are so short. Like they have to duck when they go through every door. So the house looks really old and dated, but it is. It's probably from the, maybe even the 1800s, if not the early 1900s. So I noticed that more than, hey, you can tell this was filmed in 2004 and not 2024. Let's see. I think some of it is held up pretty well. Yeah, I want to go back and look up when I watched some, like, now how old is this? How many years ago was this?
Yeah.
So
to me, it feels very timeless, which I like. Since we both have watched it so late, it's nice that it does not feel dated.
Yeah. I would say I'm pretty close to agree. Yeah. I might not be quite as timeless as you are, but pretty close. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good. A couple other characters I could think of were Mrs. Tishel, the pharmacist, and PC Mylow, Mark Mylow, the constable, and Stewart.
Mark. Yeah, I'm waiting to learn more about him. He was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Shy. Like, I don't know if shy is the right word. He was a little bit, it was kind of endearing that he was a pretty good looking man, but he wasn't very sure of himself. And I found that intriguing.
Yeah. He certainly seems to be interested in Louisa, although he then says he's not, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I wasn't sure if he decided he wasn't interested because he's, hadn't had his big boy vitamins for long enough and was worried.
No. Yeah, he lacked confidence, and I found that I found myself kind of trying to root for him, like, oh, you can do it, Mark.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so those are characters. So what did you think of Martin, Mark, and Louisa and possible relationships?
Well, I think there's a triangle there. I didn't really see that Louisa was interested in Mark particularly. And, she's interested in Martin and seems like, and he's definitely interested in her, but he just does not know how to go about it. And just when you think they've made progress, and then he says, I think you have halitosis or whatever, bad breath. Like could you have just said nothing? Just said nothing. Enjoy the moment, savor the moment. But you had to go right into a diagnosis, and it's for breath. And she just stayed overnight in a hospital. It's not like, I think anyone would have bad breath in that. It's not like she necessarily has a problem. Yeah. So he just, and it didn't even seem like he quite understood, even afterwards, like, oh gosh, I shouldn't have said that. I think everyone has blurted out something and wish they could pull it back, but he did not even seem to realize that. On the other hand, she, I'm sure in season 2 I don't think it's going to be permanent, but she does understand that he's different, but she sees some good anyway. Like when she went back into the hospital, I knew she was going to go yell at that other doctor, and she said something about he's I don't know, twice the man you'll ever be or something. And so she sees something in him, and but she still knows that he lacks the social graces. But in that moment, I think she just had her fill. Like I can't excuse him right this minute. Get out of the car,
Yeah. I had crammed season 1 ahead of today. So I watched 2 episodes Friday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. And I remembered this, but it was a good sort of refresher that he has the impression that she's got bad breath and he doesn't say anything. And she's like, she kind of says, what? Say it. So
but I don't
kind
think
of was
clue he was going to say that.
Yes, and he kind of wasn't going to say anything. But then she's like, no, tell me. And so he's like, I presume you have a good dental hygiene program or whatever.
Yeah, I was just like, oh boy, this is really going downhill now.
And then you might have basically like postnasal drip or some GERD, basically. Something dietary would be the happiest outcome. It's like, he's trying to be a kind doctor, but it's like completely inappropriate for the moment.
Yeah.
And she certainly was the first one to kiss. She was the one who kissed him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, they kept moving their hands towards each other, and then they stopped, and then she just reached over and kissed him. Yeah, and that wasn't surprising that she would be the one to do that, but
yeah, he doesn't seem like he's got it in him.
Yeah, I think in season 2, I don't know if it'll be 1 episode or 2, but he's going to have to do something sweet to win her over again.
Right. I'm still looking at it. Did you notice the music? I got several of these questions I got online from people who subscribe to my Facebook page. I was like, what would you like me to ask? So did you notice the music at all?
You wish you had my husband on here instead of me. He always notices the background music, and I usually don't. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I do notice it, and so I guess this viewer had also noticed it. I think it's Eileen. I'm not sure, but I notice the music all the time. I love it. Okay, so let's do a little bit of comparison. Since you are a Best Medicine know-it-all, let's talk a bit about the 2 shows. So what's your impression having 13 episodes of Best Medicine behind you to have watched season 1 of the original show?
Well, I feel like in Best Medicine, because it was 13 episodes, you get to know the characters a little bit more. And whereas in this one, I feel like I don't really know yet exactly what all of them are going to be like. And some of them are different in the 2 shows. I felt like Doc Martin is close, somewhat similar. Each actor does it a little bit differently, but you have the doctor that's overly dressed for the town and lacks social graces, but is very smart doctor and helps save the day and all that kind of stuff. That's pretty similar. The Elaines, the other Elaine is updated because they didn't have streaming back then in 2004. But the personality and the style is pretty similar. The one that I think Louisa's a little bit different, but I'm not really sure yet. I felt like Louisa in Doc Martin was maybe a little more, had her stuff together a little bit better, maybe. The other Louisa was maybe a little more scattered. I don't know. And the one that I thought there were a couple characters I thought were really different. And one was Mark. I thought that the Mark I already said that I thought the Mark in the Doc Martin was kind of endearing, and he seemed a little shy and scared and nervous and like he needed help. And as opposed to the Mark in Best Medicine, who was this like fake macho guy that I didn't find endearing at all. And a couple of times in Best Medicine, it seemed like they were showing how sad he was because of the breakup, and how and you tried to give him a break, and you think, okay, there's going to be some growth here, and then it seemed like there wasn't. So I never really got too attached to Mark in Best Medicine, and I haven't seen as much of the Mark in Doc Martin, but so far I would have maybe a more positive view of him. But the other person, it's a more minor character that I felt was different, that I was really kind of disappointed in the one in Doc Martin, is Bart's son.
Bert's son, yeah, Al.
Yeah, okay. So in Best Medicine, in the 13 episodes, they kind of developed into a relationship. In Doc Martin, you could see he's interested, but it hasn't really happened yet. So I don't know in season 2 or down the road if it will, or if the two shows are different. But I really liked the character in Best Medicine. I just felt like he was nice and smart, and he really cared for her, and he was, I don't know, I just thought he was a kind person in general. I felt like he understood Doc Martin a little bit more too, maybe. He just seemed like a nicer person. Bart's son, he was right in there on the teasing, and I wasn't sure he looked guilty, and he just, I don't know, somehow he doesn't seem quite as nice to me as the one in Best Medicine.
Yeah. No, I get it. The Al in Doc Martin seems a bit nerdier, but he still says things that imply, like, you know, the Al in Best Medicine, we know he did really well in his SATs, right? He got like perfect scores.
I do know that, right?
In Doc Martin, he's quoting Daphne du Maurier. So, like, we know that there's more going on there than might necessarily be showing up because Bert's just got him, you know, working on the plumbing and stuff. And
right.
And he's very awkward. He's very shy and awkward. And you can tell he's never been good with girls because Elaine calls him a non, which I think is cultural. Like, I think it's kind of like you were kind of like somebody that none of the girls would be interested. Yeah, none of the girls would be interested in you. But now he's gotten older and he's got a nice bum, you know?
Yeah.
And I got the sense that Elaine and Doc Martin was using Al to get Greg back. Because in the last, I think it's the last episode, you know, Al puts that whole iPod together for her with all her favorite music.
Right.
Comes in to give it to her, and she's just on the phone back with Greg and just trying to make him jealous.
And it's not like I dislike him. I was sad for him then.
Right.
But there was something about the other character in the other show that I just liked a little better.
I think he's more charming.
I think the one in Best Medicine could have dated another girl, definitely.
Yes.
And he just was Elaine. This one, I can see how he would have some trouble. And, you know, from that point, maybe I do want to root for him, but I was just hoping to be a little nicer. I didn't like the participation in the teasing thing. I feel like the other the other show would have said, Dad, don't do that, you know?
Right. Yes, I think you're right. I think I got a sense when he was, at first, he wasn't chuckling, and then he kind of looked around and other people were chuckling, so he chuckled.
Maybe. And you know, he doesn't have the confidence, and so he's trying to fit in. So,
yeah.
So it's not like I've written him off. I will be interested to see how he develops as the seasons go on, if he is still in the show.
The Elaines, I found that both of them annoyed the heck out of me, but Elaine in Best Medicine grew on me over time. I mean, she showed, you know, a lot more depth. I think there were similar themes, right? So you have Elaine in Best Medicine doesn't want her mother to marry Dum Dum, right?
Right.
So she doesn't want to participate in that wedding.
Yeah, the dad.
Yeah. So she doesn't want her father to marry this much younger woman with the dog in her purse.
Yeah.
And in both situations, Doc Martin talks Elaine into kind of being a little accepting of the situation.
Give your parents a chance. Yeah.
But for some reason, as annoying as the Elaine is in Doc Martin, she bugged me less than the Elaine in Best Medicine when she was doing her bear thing and all of the streaming and all of the stupid online stuff. And I would say that Elaine in Doc Martin is far more obnoxious.
So far, yes. I'm waiting to see, her, you know, like in the Best Medicine, pretty early on, we saw a softer side of her when she discovered that Doc Martin, this is a difference in plot, but she discovered that Doc Martin had the blood fear and she covered for him. And, you know, she said, I can help you here. I can't imagine that Elaine and Doc Martin helping him.
No.
And so, yeah, that was interesting. And in the Best Medicine, you could sort of see why, okay, give her another chance. So far in this one, I haven't seen that she was worthy of another chance, but...
Well, you know, it just seems like in both shows, the town seems to be very behind their Elaine. And it's like you could understand it more in Best Medicine.
Yeah. Was it specifically Elaine, or are they just loyal to other Portwenners, you know? You just have to live there for a long time and they're loyal to you? I don't know.
That's a good point. I think there is definitely some of that. But also, there were people who were just like, Elaine's a nice girl. You know, Elaine's a good girl. How would you fire Elaine? Elaine's a good girl. And it's like, no, she's not. She's horrendous, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like you liked the show well enough to continue it. So that's good.
Definitely. I'm definitely intrigued. Partly, you know, if I had just watched Doc Martin, I think I would watch the second episode. But having 13 episodes of Best Medicine under my belt, I want to see, are they going to do this in Doc Martin? Are they going to do that in Doc Martin? Because there is some overlap, but there's some differences. Like they made him an only child in Doc Martin, but they gave him a sister in Best Medicine.
Right.
I guess to help explain the blood thing, but we don't completely know yet because that hasn't been revealed.
So one thing that's the same but different. You've got this doctor who has a blood phobia, who was a surgeon who can't do surgery anymore, and he goes to where he lived or at least he spent summers. But there's a very different explanation as to what the blood phobia is. So do you have any comments about that?
Well, I found it interesting that in Best Medicine, they're kind of dragging it out. I mean, we've had 13 episodes and we know bits and pieces, but we really don't know the whole story. It seems like it has something to do with his sister and an accident but what caused that happened when he was young, and he did do surgery for a while, but something else happened that maybe brought him back to his sister and then he couldn't. It's not really clear. Yeah. Whereas in Doc Martin, I was like, wow, in episode 2, we're learning, something about it. And I found that striking, that difference. And I wonder if we're going to learn a little bit more in Doc Martin about why it's just more about why, he said that it's somebody's wife, it's somebody's child, and therefore he just couldn't do it anymore. That seems a little bit of a contrast for this guy that doesn't seem to have social skills, and yet he felt that so deeply. And so I'd like to learn more about that.
Yeah, just to see if there's more to the story. But like you said, it's just laid out for us in episode 2 when he tells Marge Fenn about it.
I would like to learn more about that, but I didn't feel like they were playing with me. I felt like they gave an explanation. And in the other show, I just feel like it's a little bit of a gimmick. We're just going to drag this out as long as we possibly can so that people will keep watching. So, and if we tell them the story, they won't watch anymore. And so we can't do that. I felt like
I hope we find out about it in season 2. I really need Robert to explain that accident.
I don't think they can drag it out too much longer. I think people really will say, okay, we're never going to know and stop watching. But if they do that, if they try to do that.
Other plot lines will have to draw them in,
we'll have to, because right now that one's just hanging there,
And you've got, at least a love triangle, if not a love square in Best Medicine, because you've got, Mark and Louisa and Martin and what's her name?
Is
the doctor friend? Eden Montgomery.
Yeah.
Yep. Dr. Montgomery. So, yep.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I don't think Martin, let's see, I didn't think Martin really had feelings for her anymore, but she might be going after him. Yeah. Lots of room for misunderstanding there.
Yes, there is.
And I wondered why they changed the Mark thing too, because in Doc Martin it doesn't seem like Louisa and Mark, that was a new thing, not something that had gone on for several years and they just broke up, right? Maybe you shouldn't answer that because let me watch season 2.
I'm not giving anything away, but there are definitely differences in how they've portrayed things in the show.
Yeah. The most important thing, though, that I wanted to say is the dog is better in Doc Martin.
I agree. And
I just like that dog more.
And I also like how in season 1 of Doc Martin, you never see him warming up to the dog, whereas in season 1 of Best Medicine, he seems to kind of warm up to the dog. But
did he warm up before episode 7? Because I can't remember what episode it was. Because you're comparing 13 to 6. Maybe it was.
That's true. Yeah, I'm not going to give anything away.
Yes, no, but I agree. He did not warm up to the dog. But I'm a person who likes at least friendly dogs. So, and that dog seemed friendly. I liked that dog.
Yeah, he was good. What did you think of the scene? This one cracked me up. The Peter Cronk episode when he has to be taken in the ambulance.
Display, that was 6, yeah.
But Louisa, hears from Mrs. Cronk, realizes after she hangs up that Mrs. Cronk is having a
heavy breathing with Mrs. Cronk, who couldn't, yeah.
And then she calls Martin, and so she's basically talking through the answering machine, and he's having a dream about her.
Yes, that was pretty interesting.
And I'm thinking to myself, as an actress, I am not sure if you would pay me enough to lick somebody's nose.
Yeah, I found that strange, but okay.
But it made perfect sense when he wakes up with the dog.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. At the time, I was like, what is she doing there?
Yes.
And then he wakes up and it's the dog. Yeah. That
but I thought that was a very funny scene.
That was well done because it totally fooled me. Yeah.
Yeah. Comparing the two shows, part of the whole idea of it is sort of posh guy comes to town that he spent summers in with a blood phobia and he doesn't really fit in. Who do you think fits in more to the town they show up in? Martin Ellingham or Martin Best?
Again, it might be a 6 versus 13 thing, but I feel like Martin Best isn't quite as bad at the social graces. I felt like Martin Ellingham was more just like way out there and has so much to learn. And I feel like Martin Best was maybe a little bit less bad to begin with. I mean, in terms of social graces, I'm not sure about that. And one difference that I saw in them, and this maybe means I'm a shallow person, I don't know, but I think that Josh Charles is more attractive than Martin Clunes. So I don't know if I'm portraying that to say, well, Martin Best is a little bit less bad with the social graces just because I think he's better looking than Martin Clunes. And in comparing the episodes, this is I don't think they had this plot. Did they have this plot in Best Medicine? I'm not sure. But in Doc Martin, there was the 14-year-old girl that he cured that had like this super crush on. I just found that a hard to believe. I mean, a guy without social graces, just because he saved her at 14, I would think your hormones would be raging and you would only go for looks. And so that I found that a little bit not believable. And even more unbelievable when her father was so understanding and nailed it, what she was going through, and was saying and trying to say he felt sorry for I'm sorry she's doing this to you, rather than what are you doing to my daughter?
Right.
So certainly I feel like an American TV show dad would always say, what are you doing to my daughter? In real life, maybe people are more observant and know what's going on. I don't know, but that little plot thing, I thought, no, I can't really buy that.
Yeah, that one, I cracked up at that one just because, you just saw her like she's traumatized, right? I mean, if you ever hear anybody talk about a dislocated shoulder, it is excruciating.
I can imagine and guess.
And I actually have loose shoulder joints, so my shoulder can actually fall out of its joint while I'm sleeping.
Gosh.
And it hurts a lot. But so he almost seemed like he performed a miracle on her, because she's, in this excruciating pain, and then he just does this thing, and all of a sudden she's so much better.
Yeah, it's every time I've seen that done, on TV, it's like night and day. I'm in excruciating pain. I'm not in pain at all, Yeah. So that's why I said maybe it makes me superficial. It just seemed like a little bit of a leap. It was funny with some of the things that she would say, and you wouldn't have to be Doc Martin to feel uncomfortable by that. I mean, anybody I think would be a little taken aback that, this 14-year-old is saying these things, and how do I make her stop, kind of thing.
Right.
That wasn't
and you're trying to be nice, right? Like you're trying to be,
right.
I like you too. You're a nice person too. Like, what do I say here?
And thinking,
don't come here again without an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he's talking to Mark, and he's trying to explain it to Mark. I just want to make it clear that I am not interested in a 14-year-old or whatever. And people are walking by like, what?
What? Like, why are you even saying that? Why are you bringing that up? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I would say is I find that I agree with you. I think the Martin Best fits just quicker. He's not as much of a mismatch with the village.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put it all on the Martin character as much as I put a lot of it on the village, because I feel like Portwenn, 2 words, Best Medicine, seems far more sort of upscale-y than Portwenn, Cornwall. And so the distance between Martin Ellingham and the villagers of Portwenn seems like a bigger gap socioeconomically than the gap between, and I think it might just be because they show that harbor with all those sailboats in the beginning of Best Medicine, and it's like, is that in Portwenn, or is that closer to, the regular where the population really lives, and then Portwenn is out in the sticks? But
yeah, I can't imagine that anywhere in the United States that's on ocean is not really well off,
Yeah. You look at the guys who run the restaurant, the Salty Breeze. I mean, you've got, an excellent chef from New York City, and you've got.
But isn't one of them a retired, stockbroker or something that, may have had money from before, but still. Yeah.
So you've got, a couple of New York people, they fit in. So it doesn't seem like there's such a gap in Maine than there seems to be in Cornwall.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So you've got 6 episodes of Doc Martin under your belt at this point. what are your predictions of what happens next? And you're sort of, you've got a little bit of information from Best Medicine, but I would say Best Medicine, I've mentioned on our podcast that it's its own show at this point. So you know.
Yeah. I feel like Martin and Louisa they'll have a very rocky path, but will progress.
Okay.
And it won't be, that's not the last mistake he's going to make, saying about the breath.
Right.
And I do think, I hope it's not drawn out over all the seasons, but I do think that Mark, at least for a little while, is going to make a triangle out of that.
Okay.
And so I kind of hope he, maybe eventually finds somebody else or something. Elaine is really, really bad, so I hope she grows. I don't know. I just would like to see some redeeming quality there that I haven't seen yet. Because in Best Medicine, it seemed like, okay, maybe you should give her another chance. And in Doc Martin, why? But okay. And I kept thinking that I'd find something to make it worth it, and I haven't seen it yet, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he only hires her back because, the whole town turns against him. He can't buy anything at the store. He can't buy anything at the restaurant,
Is she really worth it? Not sure yet. Yeah.
Yep. What else?
Yeah, I think it may take a while for Al. Is that Bart's son? Mm-hmm. Al to.
Yeah. And it's Bert.
Bert.
Bert. B-E-R-T. Bert.
Yeah, I have a Bart in my neighborhood, so that's why.
No wonder. Yes, that'll do it.
I think it's could take a while for Al to win over Elaine if he ever does.
Gotcha.
I liked Aunt Joan, and it's sad that her situation with the man she truly loved. I wondered about HIPAA. Did they have HIPAA in England? Because I thought that he was going to pussyfoot around it and try and get her to gas or something so that he wasn't. But it looked like he completely divulged the secret, which he, as a doctor in the U.S. couldn't have done. But
yeah.
Anyway,
because he said, "I want to talk to you confidentially," right? He left her a message or something.
So I don't know, really have a prediction for her, but I kind of hope we see more of her. I liked her, kind of no nonsense attitude. Yeah.
What about Aunt Joan versus Aunt Sarah?
I kind of like them both, but they are different. Aunt Sarah is a little more wisecracking. She's not too far off from the Meemaw character she played in Young Sheldon. I didn't watch that show all the time, but my husband liked it, and sometimes I would be in the room when it was on. So I just feel like Aunt Joan's a little bit different, but I can't really say why. I mean, we've seen some of her, but I haven't seen that much of her yet. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
I found Aunt Joan as a farmer was more plausible than Aunt Sarah as a lobster woman.
Probably. That does make sense. Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, she just looks like her, if I saw that, if you saw the actress somewhere, you'd be like, why aren't you on a farm? Not, you do a great job playing that role. You know what I mean? She just fits.
Right. Yeah. And that's a general comment. I would say that I just find I always comment that it just feels like it's a documentary. Like they filmed real people to me in Doc Martin versus Best Medicine to me feels like a TV show. I don't know if that comment makes sense.
You think Doc Martin's more like a documentary? Seems more like a documentary.
I mean, it just feels like these are real people that are being shown. Like I believe these people. They seem far more genuine to me.
Yeah, me too.
But it could go back to, as Americans, we don't know. We can't judge whether these people are quirky or not to people who live in England. Maybe they seem as unreal to people in England as the people in Best Medicine do to us.
They fit our American view of Britain.
Right.
We think British people could be like that. But we don't think American people are as much like that.
That's be good to get some comments on that. Please set us Yanks straight.
Yeah.
And one other person who is portrayed in both series, but with different names and different relationships, the pharmacist in Best Medicine is Mark Mylow's mom, and the pharmacist in Doc Martin is just Mrs. Tischel.
She's not Mark's mom. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're going to continue watching it.
I am.
I like having a new newbie. Yep. Folks, if you've enjoyed this episode, I hope that you'll hit the like button, subscribe to the feed, give me some comments. I always try to write back to them, and continue watching this. This will be in the Doc Martin playlist. In the meantime, if you haven't watched my short on Buckham Fair, I hope you'll look at that. See if maybe you could kick a couple of bucks in over to that fundraiser. It's a good way to say thanks for all the good Doc Martin Best Medicine content we've gotten. We'll definitely be doing at least a season 2 Doc Martin newbie with Patty again. Patty, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for joining Podcast Portwenn. Podcast Portwenn is an independent fan production, not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by Buffalo Pictures, ITV, Fox, or the creators of Doc Martin or Best Medicine.